Welcome to the ResearchWorks podcast, brought to you in association with Curtin University and the Healthy Strides Foundation. Your hosts are Dr. Dana Poole and Dr. Ashley Thornton, and together we will interview world-leading researchers in the area of child health to support your practice in being more evidence-based.
The team at the ResearchWorks podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which we live and work. We pay our respects to all First Nations peoples, elders past and present, and would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast each week, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We recognise their continued connection to this beautiful budja we call home.
Well, hello everyone. We're so glad you decided to join us today for an episode of the ResearchWorks podcast. But Ash, we're recording an episode a bit earlier than usual.
We are. We have a very exciting episode today, an early episode, and it's exciting because we have a very special guest with us.
We do.
Please welcome Minister Bill Shorten.
Hi.
Welcome. As you look behind you, no, it's definitely you.
Very modest.
I was looking for the special guest. A long-time listener, first-time caller.
I love that. Well, it's such a privilege to have you in our studio today. And today you're doing a bit of a tour around Healthy Strides. There's a hive of activity that's happening here. But we're really glad to be able to share some of our conversation with our listeners today. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, when we started recording this podcast a few years ago, our aim was really to promote knowledge translation. So getting research evidence into the hands of clinicians who can implement it into their practice. And if you told me back then we'd be speaking with you today, Minister, just a few years later, I don't know that I would have believed it.
I would have laughed. I'm like, yeah, sure.
Not us.
Yeah, that's true. But we're still here.
Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah.
I think you're being both more modest than you realise. When we campaigned to set up the National Disability Insurance Scheme more than 10 years ago, one of the dreams I had was that through the investment of individual packages in people, that we would create more research, more investment, the depth of services. So, I'm the one who's lucky enough to be here to see what you're doing to make a dream real for people.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And we see it every day, don't we?
do.
We see the impact of what the NDIS has done.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people within Australia, they know what the NDIS is, but it's probably worth for our international listeners to know a bit more about that just before we go on.
Absolutely, because we have people from Australia who we're lucky enough to call our listeners, but we do have some overseas listeners who join us as well. So for those listeners in particular, we're really excited today because Minister Bill Shorten is the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, or the NDIS, which we might refer to it as we go through the podcast. And in Australia, the NDIS provides funding to eligible people with disability to gain more time with family and friends, greater independence, access to new skills, jobs or volunteering in their community, and an improved quality of life. The NDIS has certainly changed the landscape of service provision here in Australia, and it really puts choice and control in the hands of consumers.
Yeah. It's truly world leading. And we were just saying as you walk through the doors today, we wouldn't be around as an organisation, even doing knowledge translation if there wasn't that space to think about it and to be able to push the boundaries of what we can do.
Yes.
But before we get into some of the questions that we do have for the Minister, we probly haven't told him about the fact that we have an icebreaker question.
No, but he is a long-time listener, so he'll be familiar with our icebreaker question. And we like to get those out of the way before we get into the serious stuff.
By all means.
Yep. Here we go.
So our question for you today is, would you rather be chronically overdressed or chronically underdressed?
I'd rather be overdressed, but more often than not, I'm underdressed.
Oh.
My wife has told me, stop wearing the tracksuit. COVID-19's over.
Oh.
You must go back to clothes which are not all sided by elastic.
And that was such a hard transition as well.
It was. And I have to admit, I'm still struggling with that. So if I do have a weekend at home, it's the elasticated pants all the way.
Much more productive in my Ugg boots.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd
I like that
aspire
answer.
to be overdressed, but more often than not underdressed.
What about you, Dana?
I think I would be the same. I aspire to be overdressed because we know what it's like to turn up to something and you just go, this is very inappropriate. So if you go overdressed, at least from that point of view, you can come in confidently and then you just make everyone else feel bad for not like dressing to the occasion. You just
you
change
pay
the
people a
narrative.
compliment of making the effort to dress up, but I'm a Gen Xer, so I can still remember when, and my family didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. I can remember when we used to dress up to catch an aeroplane.
Yeah.
That is not a rule that applies anymore.
No, it is not.
No.
That's so true. That's changed a lot.
I actually went to the movies the other night for the first time in probably 5 years. There were people there in their pajamas.
No.
Yeah, they were very comfortable to go to. And I had made the effort, because I hadn't been for so many years, to put some nicer
I would say that
on.
would be the COVID effect. We watch movies in pajamas.
Yeah,
way
and
too
they had blankets with them. They had the Ugg boots on.
But then there's this new fashion being invented. I don't know if it's a global fashion or an Australian fashion, the hoodie.
Yes,
I have seen
there were
that.
lots of hoodies at the cinema that
Have
night.
you got hoodies in the West yet, or that's next year?
No, we have.
It's made it across the Nullarbor.
It has made its way.
I mean, they're ugly and comfortable all at the same time.
Yeah, well, at least it's marketed that way. It's unapologetically so.
Absolutely.
Will our overseas guests know what an hoodie is? How would you describe an hoodie?
It's like a blanket that you wear. So it has a hood. That's kind of the mechanism for putting it on.
Yeah.
You stick your head through the hood.
Like a poncho.
And then
It's like an
fluffy
overdressed poncho.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fluffy.
Yeah.
Warm. Yeah. Well, what about, I feel like we've got a bit of a glimpse in terms of the chronically overdress or underdress, Ash. Where would you see yourself?
Oh, I think if I'm going to an event, I'd rather be overdressed than underdressed because you can just own it, right?
You own it, yeah.
But
perspective.
My soul, deep in my soul, I just want to wear my tracksuit pants.
Yeah. Well, there we go. We have NDIS and what's happening in our souls in common.
Yeah,
when it
that's
comes
really
to
good.
fashion.
Wonderful.
Well, we should probably get into the NDIS
Let's
then,
do that.
while we've still got the time
Yes.
to. All right, here we go.
Well, it's been a great show and I've got to go. Thank you.
Quick question.
I know we asked about the hoodies. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Minister, we read the beautiful foreword that you wrote for the Australian Cerebral Palsy Register report this year, 2023. One of the key phrases that really stood out for us as researchers, as clinicians who work with children with disability was that this register was setting the standard of best practice that serves all disability types. Can you expand on what you mean by that?
Evidence is crucial. It's about learning lessons and then not forgetting them. It's about understanding what works.
Yeah.
Disability can happen to any of us.
Yeah.
And this is just the underlying values of the NDIS, which we helped create, as I said, about 10 years ago. Disability can affect any of us. But up till a decade plus ago in Australia, the only way you could get funding is if the crisis you were in today was worse than yesterday, and tomorrow you'd be an even worse crisis than today.
Wow.
But allocating resources by crisis is just wasteful. So instead, the NDIS believes that impairment's a fact of life. Get it at birth through a non-standard journey. You can have it in the blink of an eye in a motor vehicle accident or swimming in the surf or just through the onset of ageing and the particular personal DNA key you have in your system. But it shouldn't define you. The reality is that a person shouldn't be viewed just through the prism of their impairment. You've got to look at the whole person. So the NDIS was a breakthrough idea where you give a package of money to an individual and their family and trust them to make decisions. And then what hopefully by providing support for the most severely and profoundly impaired people can do is it will attract new investment.
Yeah.
The big barrier of disability is the lack of money, the lack of power. Now the NDIS has, I think, cracked that nut and now we can work on that. And now what's very important is 10 years on, we've got to look at what's working. And we've also learnt that the earlier you can intervene in a child's life to help them in their journey, you have a disproportionately exponential, wonderful effect for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
And what the NDIS does is it looks at what can a person do, not what they can't do.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been a big shift. And in the research conversations we have with researchers from all over the world, we're talking about that now. We're not talking about the problems to fix, but what are the possibilities and what can they do? And that's been an amazing paradigm shift. So, Minister, the sustainability of our NDIS is obviously always a huge topic of conversation. What's beautiful right now, we want to ensure will be here for future generations. So how do we decide where the best value for money is?
Well, for our friends overseas, but also even for Australians who don't follow the ins and outs, there was a lot of unmet need in Australia. And what's happened is once we've rolled out this scheme, more people have put their hand up for some support than was previously estimated needed support. But that's fine. What's happened, though, is that sometimes where there's government money, you do get opportunistic behaviour by some service providers who seek to funnel some of that package to themselves. So what we need to do is make sure that when we're providing support for people in their budgets, that they access services that are reasonable and necessary, which are evidence-based.
Yes. Yep.
So I think what you're doing here and just the daily transformations, that's evidence-based. Sometimes if you're a family and you've got a child who's taking a non-standard journey in terms of development, you can be desperate.
Yeah.
You want to do everything you can. That's just it's called love.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
But that means that sometimes people sell desperate families therapies which don't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the value of the evidence. The evidence sorts what is a really good investment from something which perhaps isn't going to deliver the returns and is not the best path.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for us as clinicians and researchers to hear that's so encouraging to know if that's how you position yourself with evidence, that's going to be supportive for the long term.
Yes.
Like this is the direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And, science evolves and evidence changes, and it's something that we all have to move and grow with and keep up with.
That means investing in it. This is my second time as a politician covering the disability portfolio. I first got involved between 2007 and 2010. And the research world in disability was fragmented.
Yeah.
Most of the money was just going in terms of firefighting, dealing with the crisis.
Yeah.
What we've tried to do is now the NDIS, and this is what's different to other countries, is we're on a path in the next 2 decades to be about 2% of our national economy just invested in disability. But that's generating hundreds of thousands of jobs and it's changing hundreds of thousands of lives. But we've just got to make sure that there's evidence guiding the decisions. But I've got no doubt that with early intervention based on evidence, there are kids who 10 and 15 and 20 years ago would have suffered the tyranny of low expectations. Instead, they're going to do a whole lot of amazing things which, because of our because not of them, but because of our community's misunderstanding of disability and just viewing it as a deficit, we'd have written them off into the too hard basket, which we no longer waste human potential.
No. That's beautifully said.
Absolutely.
Gosh, well, those snippets of time that we even just heard from you there, it's inspiring in the sense of it just I know I feel really encouraged about what we can do, and I hope our listeners also feel the same too.
Yeah, and confident in the path forward.
Yeah, that's right.
But what you're all doing is inspiring. What we saw with some of the people you're helping, it's good. It's a combination of sensible support, not being, proper, good, generous support, but also clever people and loving families and very talented kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for stopping by into our humble studio here at Healthy Strides. It's been lovely to have you here, and we hope to have you again another time.
Yeah,
we'll host you again. To all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in for this very special but quick episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a privilege to have you, Minister. And we hope you'll join us again.
I'm Bill, and it's incredible. The privilege is all mine. There's a mutual admiration society going on this
fabulous.
podcast.
Love it. I know. It's all happening. Well, thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you all again next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.